operant conditioning, or how we can use science to change behavior. First, I would like you to find a partner and consider the following question with them. Tom is 10 years old and cleans his room before going to bed every night. What do you think motivates his behavior? Go ahead and record your answers at menti.com using the code below. Okay, cool. We have a lot of different thoughts on this. A common theme is that parents would punish him if he doesn't clean his room, or maybe he gets rewarded for cleaning his room. He gets compliments, his friends might admire it, so on and so forth. So these are describing examples of operant conditioning. So during this lesson, we will discuss the brief history of operant conditioning, components of operant conditioning, and reinforcement schedules. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to understand these different elements, and you should be able to create your own optimal operant conditioning plan. So B.F. Skinner, a behavioralist, argued that we should examine the external observable causes of human behavior. And he defined operant behaviors as conscious, not as knee-jerk reaction behaviors. And he created what is referred to as the Skinner box, in which a rat was put into a room with a lever and a red or green light. And if the rat presses down on the lever when the green light is flickering, it is rewarded with some food. Whereas if the rat presses down on the lever when the red light is flickering, it receives the punishment of a shock. And they find that the rats learn how to get that desired outcome of the food based on their behavior. So we have 4 different components of operant conditioning: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. And these different components differ depending upon whether or not they are intended to increase a behavior or decrease a behavior, and whether or not they're doing that by adding something, which is referred to as positive, or whether or not they are doing that by removing something, which is referred to as negative. So an example of a positive reinforcement is recycling machines that pay money for recycling an item. So the desired behavior of recycling the item is then rewarded by giving of money. An example of negative reinforcement is that annoying car alarm that will go off until you fasten your seatbelt, and so that desired behavior of fastening the seatbelt will then be rewarded by the ending of that car alarm sound. An example of positive punishment is a team that must run a lap every time a teammate gives up during an exercise. So that undesired behavior that you want to demotivate of giving up is then punished by the administering of an extra lap. Whereas an example of negative punishment is when kids lose access to TV for not doing homework. And so in this case, the undesired behavior that you want to demotivate, which is not doing homework, is then met with the taking away of something desired, which is, in this case, watching TV. And so now that we have considered the different components of operant conditioning, please consider these 5 examples and give your best guess at what type of operant conditioning each one is describing, and we'll go over them as a group in a bit. Okay. Well, great work, everyone. We have correctly identified which components of operant conditioning are described in each one of these examples. Okay. Next, we're going to discuss reinforcement schedules. So the schedule used to reinforce a behavior changes how quickly and strongly a new behavior is adopted or an old behavior is removed. So there's 2 broad categories. There's continuous reinforcement, in which case the behavior is consistently reinforced after every single time that you do it. Whereas partial reinforcement is when it's only sometimes reinforced. And the sometimes part varies a lot, and let's get into that now. So First, we have our fixed ratio schedules and our fixed interval schedules. So fixed ratio schedules describe reinforcement that happens after a specific number of responses. So for example, after reading 3 chapters of a textbook, you are then rewarded with 1 chocolate bar. A fixed interval schedule describes reinforcement that happens after a specific amount of time. So after participating on swim team for a week, then you receive that same chocolate bar. Now, variable ratio schedules and variable interval schedules are different from the first two in that the occurrences are more random. So the variable ratio schedule is reinforced after a random number of responses. So rather than after every time you read 3 chapters, the amount varies, whereas you could get a chocolate bar after reading 1 chapter, and then the next time you get it after reading 3 chapters. The point is that the amount of responses which triggers this reward varies and is random. Whereas a variable interval schedule is reinforced after a random amount of time. So instead of getting that chocolate bar after every week of being on the swim team, now you could get it after 1 week, and the next time after 3 weeks, and the next time after 2 weeks, and the next time after 1 week. The amount of time is random. So we have our 4 different schedules. Our fixed ratio and variable ratio schedules give you that reward or punishment after a specific or random number of responses, whereas your fixed interval and your variable interval schedules give you that reward or punishment after a specific or random amount of time. So the fixed ratio schedule encourages fast learning and steady behavior, whereas the fixed interval schedule encourages slower learning, slower adoption of that behavior, but still a steady behavior over time. The variable ratio and the variable interval schedules are encouraging both fast learning, a quick adoption of this behavior, and also long-lived behavior that is not going to go extinct or is not going to go away over time. So now I'm going to get into a personal example. Our neighbor has a cat named Juniper, who is an outdoor cat and often likes to come by and spend a lot of time at our house in order to receive lots of head scratches, which it is very motivated by. However, sometimes we need Juniper to leave our house, and we do not have a cat door for him to do it on his own. So, therefore, we created a kind of schedule to try to reinforce this behavior. In this case, after every single time we say to Juniper, "Good night," then if Juniper does choose to leave the house, we reward him with a head scratch. And we found over time that if we just do this some of the times, it still pays off and is effective and encourages Juniper to leave the house after we say "good night," probably because he's expecting that there's still a chance of receiving that head scratch. And so this is an example of a variable ratio schedule. All right. Now we're going to have a final activity where you can apply what you have learned. So form a group of 4, and you're going to go ahead and create an operant conditioning plan for a specific scenario. The scenario is that a mother wants to improve her children's eating habits. So when creating this operant conditioning plan, you should consider whether or not you want it to involve positive or negative elements, and whether or not you want it to reinforce a desired behavior versus punish an undesired behavior, and also what schedule you want this reinforcement to be on. I'll give you 5 minutes to come up with this plan. We're going to come together and share our responses and decide which one we like the most. All right. Great job, everyone. Our chosen example is a positive reinforcement plan, specifically 1 hour of TV time. at variable ratio in schedules, so that's after every 1 to 5 meals, it varies, of eating their vegetables at dinner. So the children will be encouraged to eat vegetables in order to hopefully earn the positive reinforcement of that 1 hour of TV time. All right. So in some, operant behavior involves pairing a voluntary behavior with a consequence, so that it can be positive or negative, adding or taking something away, and it can be a reinforcement or a punishment, so motivating or demotivating behavior. And schedules of reinforcement affect the speed of learning and the persistence of that behavior. So next week we're going to quiz your knowledge on all of this material on our weekly quiz.